and area partners have been working on creating. Okay, so just to start out, what is a comprehensive safety action plan? This is really about making the roadways safer for all users and focusing on eliminating serious injury and death crashes on the roadways in the area. These plans use something called a safe systems approach. And again, the focus is on eliminating severe injury and fatal crashes. And why do a safety action plan like this? Primarily to prevent roadway death and serious injury crashes in our communities. Many of us can think about a friend, family, acquaintance, a school classmate, or someone who was either severely injured or lost their life, you know, a roadway crash in our lifetime. Some background on this plan is that the Des Moines area MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, received a federal grant to develop this plan, working with the member communities in the region, including the 16 member communities in 3 counties and the Des Moines Area Regional Transit Authority. We have 3 firms that are working together on this project: for Tool Design, Confluence, HDR, and HR Green. And we're aiming to complete it this spring so that we can support moving the region toward applying for implementation funds. The draft plan is posted on the website that you see above, bmampo.org. Look for Safety Action Plan. And Sean Murphy-Lopez is going to walk through what you see in the plan, what kind of content is covered in that.
All right, thanks, Mitzi. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for the folks online joining us as well. If you have any questions throughout this, just make sure to add your question in the chat window, and we'll have some time for questions here toward the end. I'm a senior planner with Tool Design. So the plan Mitzi had mentioned applies the safe systems approach. And this is the approach that comes from the U.S. Department of Transportation, specifically the Federal Highway Administration. There's a graphic on the right, and around the circle on the right are the principles that are also included in the 6 bullets on the left. So those principles are: death and serious injuries are unacceptable. Humans make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable. Responsibility is shared. Safety is proactive. And redundancy is critical. And then there are a few other elements, and those are in the inner ring, and those are safer people, safer vehicles, safer speeds, safer roads, and post-crash care. So all of those things make up the safe system approach. And I'm just going to highlight one of those, the very last one, that redundancy is crucial. Reducing risks require that all parts of the transportation system be strengthened, so that if one part fails, so like say, for example, someone makes a mistake and someone isn't safe, that something else in here, whether it's a safer vehicle, a safer road, post-crash care, safer speeds, that ends up protecting people if that mistake is made. So the plan is, like Mitzi said, it's on the website. What does it include? It has 8 chapters. Those are on the left-hand side here. And then it has 7 appendices. And a lot of these appendices support what's in the chapters. So if you read through the plan, you might say, read chapter 3, the safety analysis. And you might have questions about it. If you have questions about it, you can always go to Appendix A, which is the crash analysis report, which has a lot more detail. So anywhere in the main body of the chapter, if any of the appendix work supports it, you'll see that reference, and you can read a lot more detail if you're interested. I'm just going to give some highlights of the plan itself. I'm not going to cover every element. I'm going to mostly go in chronological order from the beginning to the end. So chapter 2 is the chapter called commitment. And the Metropolitan Planning Organization has a policy committee. And that committee is made up of mayors, council members, and county supervisors from the entire metro area around Des Moines. And it's chaired by Polk County Supervisor Mark Holm. And this policy committee in January, just in the past month or so, has made a commitment to a target goal of reducing traffic-related deaths and serious injuries to 0 by the year 2045. Big motivation of this is, of course, to address the issue of preventing preventable deaths, but also in order to apply for federal funding to make some of these traffic safety improvements. Each body that creates a comprehensive safety action plan has to make some sort of a commitment, and they can choose the year and the goal, and this is the goal that the MPO has chosen, their policy committee. Chapter 3 gets into crash analysis key findings. And again, this is supported by Appendix A rather. There were 5 key findings. We're just going to show one chart to illustrate each key finding. There were other charts that went into these and support the key finding, but just to not overwhelm folks, we're just going to keep it brief and give you a highlight. So the first key finding is that fatal and severe crashes are more common on bigger roads. This chart right here shows the percent of fatal and severe crashes that occur on interstates, arterials, collectors, and local roads. And then it also shows the percent of the road network mileage that each one of those road types makes up of all roads in the Des Moines area. So it's the 15% of all fatal and severe crashes happen on the interstate system, but the interstate system only makes up 6% of the road network mileage in the Des Moines area. So whether the road is wider or busier, fatal and severe crashes are more common on those. The second key finding is that men and young adults are more likely to be fatally or severely injured than women and older adults and children. So the chart on the right, this shows people by age group who were either fatally or severely injured in crashes in the Des Moines area in a 5-year period between 2018 and 2022. So that's a total number. And that total adds up to a little over 1,000 people who were affected. You can see that people in the 15 to 24 and 25 to 34 age groups, they were the most likely to be fatally or severely injured. And that note at the bottom should actually say people aged 15 to 34. We were trying to grab both of these columns here. On the left-hand side, this is a chart showing the chances once someone was involved in a crash that they were fatally or severely injured. So out of the, there were many thousands of people, I think there was something like 80,000 or 100,000 people involved. But what percentage of those people were fatally or severely injured when they were involved in a crash? It's generally about 1% of people, no matter the age, except for people less than 15. Once they're involved in a crash, they have a 1 in 20 or a 5% chance of being fatally or severely injured. The third key finding was that fatal and severe crashes are more likely to occur in rural areas. A lot of people say, well, what do you mean by rural area? We use the US Census Bureau definition of an urbanized area to define what urban means. So everything within the red lines on the map on the left, those are urban areas according to our analysis. Everything outside of the white red lines, those are rural areas. So on the right-hand side, this shows the percent of people when they were involved in a crash in a rural area that were either fatally or severely injured. So 12%, 3 and 9% of people were fatally or severely injured when they were involved in a crash in one of these areas outside of the urbanized zone. In urban areas, there's a lesser chance that you are fatally or severely injured when you're involved in a crash, either 1% or 4% fatality or severe injury. That's how we reach that conclusion. Third one is that motorcyclists, pedestrians, and bicyclists are more vulnerable in crashes than motor vehicle occupants. So this chart right here shows out of everyone who was riding a motorcycle or walking or biking or an occupant of a motor vehicle, when they were involved in a crash, what percentage of those people were fatally or severely injured? Motorcyclists were 20, the chances that they were fatally or severely injured was a quarter. Pretty similar for pedestrians. It drops quite a bit for bicyclists. It goes down to closer to 1 in 10 with 9%. And for motor vehicle occupants, it's 1%. So these people who aren't in motor vehicles generally have a higher risk. And then the last key finding of the crash analysis was that speeding and failure to yield are the two biggest causes of fatal and severe crashes. So every officer who fills out a crash report, they can fill out a field that's called contributing driver circumstances. And then they can choose from those, and they can, I believe, choose multiple options. And speeding and failure to yield were the two most common options that investigating officers chose. A lot of people talk about driver distraction. That's definitely something that does happen. 4% of officers note that. And again, these are the observations of an investigating officer. In the crash analysis, we also created a map that's easy to read. You know, sometimes crash analysis maps have dots all over the place and they can get a little difficult to read. We've created what's called a high injury network. And in red, this shows the locations where the most crashes are happening, but not just the most crashes. We weighted the fatal and severe injury crashes with a 3. And then the more minor crashes got either a 2 or a 1. And so we have 3 levels. We have high, medium, and medium on the map to show where injuries are more or less likely to happen on the road network. And then we have also what's called a high risk network, whereas the previous one, we're looking at the past only. With a high risk network, we look also toward the future. Where could crashes happen based on those past crashes? If they're happening on busier roads and wider roads, where else might they happen in the future? Where are there similar roads that look like those? Because fatalities and severe injuries move around all the time. They're not always in static places. So this map over here, this shows the high risk network in rural areas. So we excluded everything in the urbanized area for this particular map, but there is also a high risk network in the plan for urban areas. So this just illustrates which roads we believe are higher risk based on those past crashes in rural areas. So that's a crash analysis. There's a lot of information in there, and you can read more about that in Appendix A. Chapter 4 is community engagement, and this is supported by Appendix B, which is about a 30-page report of all the different information we've heard from the public. We had 6 main ways we engaged with the community. We had several advisory committee meetings throughout this planning process. We had an online survey and interactive web map, which folks could take, and we had a lot of responses from that. And that's what this image comes from on the right. We interviewed local agency staff at whichever cities and counties, and the DART, the transit service, would talk to us, and we learned a lot from them. We did city council and county board presentations so they would know about this plan and the upcoming funding opportunity. We held public workshops and pop-up events. And then we held several focus group meetings at the end of this past calendar year. We had 4 key findings from that community engagement, and you can read about how these key findings were supported in that appendix of the report. The first one was that unsafe driving practices are perceived as the most prominent contributors to safety issues on our road network. The second was that infrastructure for pedestrians and bicyclists needs to be expanded and improved. The third was that people wanted to see more consistency and visibility within pavement markings, signs, and traffic signals. And then the fourth was that conversations with our first responder community who respond to these crashes, they highlighted measures that could be implemented to improve roadway behavior and trainings to support crash response after crashes occur. Chapter 5 goes into, after learning all of that information about the crash analysis and what the community thought, where should the traffic safety projects be occurring when we are implementing some sort of infrastructure change? So we looked at 5 different factors. We took that high injury network from the crash analysis, that high risk network from the crash analysis, and we weighted those most heavily. That got 65% of the weight when coming up with these projects in the map on the right. We looked at schools, parks, and transit stops. That got 15%. We looked at the Metropolitan Planning Organization. They have a degrees of disadvantage analysis that includes 6 or 7 different factors, such as poverty, where racial minorities live, where people with disabilities live, people with zero-car households. That got 10%. And then projects already planned. That might be a city or a county that's already planning to reconstruct a road. We thought we should bump those up so that if there's a traffic safety project, we can merge that existing project with any potential traffic safety funding from the federal government. Chapter 5 also talks about what would we actually do on those streets if we did a traffic safety project. This is probably 1/3 of the chart where it shows intersections on the left. There are these countermeasures in the second column. There are 8 different countermeasures that can be implemented at intersections. These have costs and timelines associated with them. Each one has a fact sheet in Appendix E. And these are also included on the boards at the open house. And if anyone's taking an online survey, you can see all of these and you can share your level of support. And you can also learn about the crash reduction factor. What percentage would we expect crashes to fall if something like, say, additional signal heads at traffic lights were implemented? And that's what I should have moved to this slide to explain. Right here, you can see those crash reductions. You can see a short sentence explaining what each of the countermeasures means. Also, Chapter 5 includes non-infrastructure countermeasures. So we all know that we can't just build the roads safe. We also need people acting safe, and we need policy changes, and we need the post-crash care community, those law enforcement responders and fire departments and ambulance crews. We need them supported. So each of those things I was just going through, we have categories, and then we have who would be typically leading each of those categories. And then we've come up with specific countermeasures. So I'll just use an example, setting appropriate speed limits. That's something that can affect safety. So we've got a section about how that can be done in the Des Moines area in Chapter 5 and Appendix E. This is an example. A lot of local law enforcement officials and communities have joined the Governor's Traffic Safety Bureau, which is required by the federal government. Each state has one. And there's educational information and a lot of coordination between different public works departments and police departments about how to communicate to the public about how to make the roads safer. Chapter 7, this is getting toward the end of the plan, has 6 policy and process changes for the MPO. So the Metropolitan Planning Organization, they work with communities around the metro to figure out how federal transportation funding should be spent. And that's been going on for decades. So what can the MPO itself do to help increase safety? They already funnel a lot of that federal money working with communities. And there's ways, for example, that safety can be increased when they're looking at how to decide which projects to do. So there's a lot of ideas in Chapter 7, 6 of them to be specific, that the MPO can implement. Chapter 8, this is the last chapter of the plan. This says, how will we actually get to that zero goal? What would it take? So we have 4 ideas on the left here about how the MPO can be transparent and report out to the public on progress. Currently, the MPO has a dashboard where they keep track of traffic fatalities in the Des Moines area, and that's that chart right below where the heart is, showing how many fatalities there were, traffic fatalities there were in the Des Moines area in 2023. There were 38. And we're recommending in this plan that a chart be, that dashboard be amended to also include what would happen in future years. What would it take to get to 2045 with with 0 fatalities. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mitzi so she can talk about the next steps.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, for those of you who are in the room at the open house, we do have one board in the corner over there that identifies some potential projects that were identified by member communities in the region. Each community was asked to submit 3 projects that they would like to see considered for implementation. So that's what you're seeing on this map. We're asking folks in the room and folks online to give feedback on it. If you could choose one of those, which one would it be? So folks in the room in person can put a sticker over on the physical map. Those who are online can go to that link that you see down in the bottom left. We need this input by Sunday, March 16th. You have a little time, but I encourage you to do it sooner rather than later because these things can just fall off our schedules if we don't do them soon. The map that you're looking at here show in blue those safety projects that were identified by local communities as ones that they would like to have considered. The red dots on this map are identifying the locations of schools. Schools were highlighted as one of the things that were considered in weighting the location. Again, for those who are in person, there are safety countermeasures and 3 boards toward the back of the room there. Each safety countermeasure can have a dot put into the box that shows either your level of support or your level of not supporting or objecting to a specific safety countermeasure. Again, this can be done online, so please do that online. I do want to just take a moment to anchor everybody's thinking around what is a safety countermeasure. So these are strategies, they're proven strategies for reducing roadway fatalities and serious injuries. Federal Highway Administration has created a lot of tools to help communities, counties, cities, towns to implement safety countermeasures so we can, as a whole nation, really drive those fatal and serious injury crashes down and try to get to 0. These strategies are designed for all road users and all types of roads. And each countermeasure addresses at least one safety focused area, whether that be speed management, intersections, roadway departures, or pedestrian and bicyclists. And then there are others that are other safety countermeasures that are cross-cutting that will actually end up impacting in a positive way numerous different categories. There is a safe system roadway design hierarchy also. The first is to remove severe conflict. So removing those conflict points between different users. Second is reducing vehicle speeds. The third is managing conflicts in time. And the fourth is increasing attentiveness and awareness. Again, lots of tools that are available for implementing this plan. This is an example of what you'll see on the online survey that's mirroring the in-person survey, where you can identify your level of support or identify that you're unsupportive to a certain extent on the survey. I do want to cover a few of the next steps for this project. Right now, we are really soliciting input. We really want the feedback from member communities, from the general public, from anyone who's interested in this topic. We want partner agencies to be able to continue to provide feedback on this and guide us toward what will become the final plan and the final grant application for implementing projects. We are continuing to work toward that grant strategy for consideration, which will be brought to the MPO policy board, and we'll need to have their support for the package of implementation projects that will be submitted. Want to thank you all so much for being patient, listening through that presentation, and welcome questions in the room, or if there are any that are submitted online, we'll do our best to respond to those. Are there any online?
Not yet.
How about in the room? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I'm kind of looking at the camera. Thank you for participating, and please do go to the online survey if you're not here in person. We appreciate your feedback.
Yeah.
All right. And for everybody in the room, if you haven't gone through and put stickers on these